Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. I'm just trying to sort out what's going on for some reason. There we go. Sort out the DLive chat. I'm told the audio and video are good. Unauthorized chat is up. Super chats are active. And I just need to load up a specific file that I acquired precisely for this. So, people have been talking about a little wish list that was compiled by a woman, and I thought it was quite educational and very useful because I think it helps illustrate what men are dealing with when it comes to the hopes and objectives of young women. And I think that it might help illustrate the point of why there's absolutely no point whatsoever in attempting to get information from the opposite sex about what they want in general. As always, when we're talking about macro issues that involve tens of millions of people, yes, there are always micro exceptions. That's irrelevant. We're talking about the macro issue. You know, when we're talking about mortgage rates, the fact that you personally might have a very low or a very high mortgage rate doesn't change the fact of what we're talking about. So this is the list of what this particular young woman wants. Now, in fairness, she does say my dream boyfriend. So this is an ideal. This is not a absolute requirements list like you sometimes see people talking about or posting or discussing with their friends and so forth. So Sam says, women aren't aware of what they actually want, best gleaned through observation of generalized mate choices. I think that's not, I think that's partially untrue. Women are aware of specific things that they want. They are not necessarily comfortable with the full spectrum of things that the evidence suggests that they do want. And it certainly doesn't, they're certainly not necessarily aware of where their lines are drawn. I think that women don't draw lines as a general rule as aggressively or as firmly as men do. You know, this is something that women often don't realize about men, is that men tend to have fairly bright lines. They might have low standards, but they don't necessarily have bright lines. Sam, I don't think that has anything to do with women. He says, or rather, they don't like to admit the darker side of their natures. Literally, no one does. You know, the only people who like to talk about the darker side of their natures are gammas who are just seeking attention. You know, how many of you have heard a guy, some low status gamma saying, I'm just afraid of myself. I'm afraid of what I'm capable of. Look, dude, literally everyone is not only is everyone capable of what you're talking about, which of course is almost certainly either revolving around their desire for a particular girl or their desire to take vengeance on everyone who's ever humiliated them. You know, so anyhow, but let's get back to this girl and her dream boyfriend. And I think that this list is educational as much for what it implies and what it fails to mention as the general specifics. So, 6 feet. Women like tall men. Interesting that it's the very first thing listed, but this is not news. Now, this is I think what got it so much attention. 300 to 500,000 total compensation. Okay, now that means that you're limited to, at a maximum, something like 2% of the population. I think it's probably actually lower than that. But you're already dealing with a very, very small fraction of the population. Very ambitious and driven. Okay? So what do we know? Tall, high status alpha. This is not exactly unusual. I was really amused once by a discussion at Susan Walsh's at the Build a Better beta or whatever, that site. And this girl who'd gotten around a bit based on her various stories and things that she'd related, said, I'm different than most women. What I want, what I'm attracted to is like, really strong alpha males. And she got deservedly torched for that one. Not so much for what she preferred, that was fine, but for the delusion that she was somehow special for preferring what the vast majority of women are attracted to in the first place, right? Now here's where you start seeing the contradictions. 1, 2, 3. By the fourth one, there's already contradictions. 27 to 33 years old. Okay, why there? Why 27 to 33? Because she's 27 herself. Women tend to be more attracted to guys who are a little bit older than they are. If you are 30 years old, you should be, quite clearly looking for 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds. They're going to be more interested in you. Brown eyes. So this is where she's getting into some, she's starting to get into the dodgy territory. Not so much because she happens to prefer brown eyes, but because she's specifying that. And there's no mention of race anywhere here. So what I think we're seeing there is a little bit of SJW anti-white signaling. Not necessarily, but, and then here's where it's just totally disastrous. Loves NYC. Loves New York City. I can tell you right now, this girl is not going to be successful in meeting anybody who is going to want to marry her in New York City. I've known, and when I say known, I mean known personally very well, in the sense of, one of my best female friends, people that I've been close to, been friendly with, and the 3 that are still alive, I'm still friendly with. But I would say, being as objective as I can, and of course, keeping in mind that my scale tends to be pretty strict, having grown up in Minnesota. But I would say that of the 4 women, 1 was a native New Yorker. The other 3 had gotten good high status jobs in New York City, working at cool, hip places, making pretty good money. I would say that one of them was an 8, and the other 3 were 7s of, one a bit weaker, one a bit stronger, but these were attractive women, and they were smart women too. All four of them, all four of them were, you know, I mean, none of them were brilliant, but they were all intelligent, um, all from wealthy families. You know, the kind of women that you would expect to be married to a pretty good looking investment banker sort or something. And in fact, uh, you know, one of them did marry a good looking, successful investment banker. Uh, Another one married a successful guy in the technology field. But here's the important thing. None of them met anybody that they could marry in New York City. All four of them left New York City before meeting the person that they eventually married, and so forth. And there's an obvious reason for this. In fact, one of them actually left the city in part because of a conversation that I'd had with her, because she was lamenting the fact that uh, she would go out with a guy, and it would seem to go well, and then they would just kind of bail for no reason. And I just asked one question. I said, "Was the guy a native New Yorker?" And no, practically no one you meet is a native New Yorker. I said, "Exactly." I said, "People don't go to New York City, men or women. They don't go to the big city because they want to settle down. They go to the big city because they want to have an adventure. They want to escape their homes, their families, their towns, and they want to be able to live an exciting year or 3 or 4 in a big city." I mean, this is obviously true of any city, but it's particularly true of the biggest city of them all. You can not only do what you want, you can kind of become who you want to be. It's the same thing as going off to college, but on steroids. And it's much more self-selected, the group that goes to the big city to work. I mean, the ironic thing is, of these four, one, two, wait, three of them also at some point in time went and lived in Paris. Not exactly a surprise, is it? This is a rite of passage among a certain class of women. Cactus Eater Bear says, "A whirlwind, heartbreaking romance." Yeah, I mean, basically, it's an excuse for people to go and live out the movies for a year or 2 or 3. So there's virtually no possibility because of the environment. So, the idea that you're going to, and also I thought it was interesting too, the whole loves NYC, because it's what's really funny about people that move to New York is that they start calling themselves New Yorkers after about 6 months. I mean, it's just great. Now, personally, I absolutely, utterly, and totally despise New York City. You know, I it's I would seriously, if you said, okay, you can spend a year in New York City, or you can spend 2 years in Napoli, which is, the most filthy, dangerous city in Italy. I would choose Napoli without even having to think twice about it. You know, I remember it was kind of funny when Psychosonic signed with Island Records for the publishing. Was it Island? I don't remember. Anyhow, they flew us out to New York to sign the contract, meet the um, meet the big guys and stuff, and they take us out to the club, to the various clubs and all that sort of thing. And it was kind of funny because all four of us hated it. We absolutely hated it. You know, I mean, they were really puzzled. They were like, but isn't this so cool? And we're kind of like, um, we have more attractive women in the clubs in Minneapolis, to be honest. It's not quite as big, but where do all these not very attractive people come from? Um, uh, Aha Moment says, does she mean living there or visiting? No, she means living there. Anyhow, let's move on here. Uh, really funny, but a bit weird. Okay. Really kind and has a moral system. What moral system is that? I mean, a moral system can mean anything. So we're not dealing with a real deep thinker here. This one is actually interesting though. Not trust fund baby, self-made. Let's get this straight. You want a 27-year-old self-made guy who is already making $300,000 a year at the age of 27. I mean, I've been fairly successful. Uh, I made my first $1 million at the age of 28. So I wouldn't have even been able to qualify for this. Forget the 6 foot thing. But um, I mean, and I don't know. I mean, I knew a couple people that might have qualified for this, but they're all in the games industry, you know. And so, um, the idea, there's such a tiny, tiny fraction of people that could possibly. Now, again, it's a dream, but the extent of the dream. I mean, this is like, and just actually, let's continue. Um, Good taste. Okay, that's fair. Good listener and planner. Okay, I can tell you right now, if you're very ambitious and driven, and you're really funny, but a bit weird, you are not a good listener. Alphas are not good listeners. Loves running and reading. In other words, she's probably in halfway decent shape. Loves me a lot. And that's the final one. Now, I think it's useful to see what we're dealing with here. Now, granted, this is the Twitter profile, so she's quite attractive. I mean, we can't really see what kind of shape she's in, but if she is interested in somebody who's a runner, she's probably reasonably attractive, right? I mean, I would say that if she's in decent shape here, she's probably a solid 9. And yet, she has absolutely no chance whatsoever at anybody like that. Um, and it's important when you are looking for someone. I mean, it's fine to have your ideals. We all have our preferences, right? But it's very helpful to be at least realistic about what you are, and to find someone who is compatible with what you do. What is she bringing to the table that can possibly justify what she's looking for? You know, I mean, what I think would be interesting, not that I'm in any sort of contact with this person, but I think it'd be interesting to know what she considers to be the minimum acceptable bar, right? And how many men in all of New York City do you think actually meet all the criteria? I would say there's probably around 20. And that might be optimistic. Um, and I would say that more or less meet them. I mean, the whole like really funny and a little bit weird thing. I mean, that's um, that's either she's watched too many movies or she thinks she's being deep somehow or something. And I mean, it's not quite as bad as it's not quite as bad as um, the Gamma who uh, infamously downgrades Victoria's Secret models because he thinks their elbows are too pointy. It's not quite that bad, but it's still pretty nuts. Um, Sir Falter says, "Women looking for a unicorn in the swamp of despair." Renee says, "Where's the must-love dogs mention?" Um, yeah, that was not there. Well, it's not there because she's in New York City and she lives in a crappy little apartment that doesn't allow pets. You know, um, I thought the only thing that I thought was moderately interesting about it was the fact that she was actively against uh, trust fund babies. Um, and so what I suspect what I suspect is that she probably got dumped by uh, some arrogant uh, trust fund kid and has learned that not to trust that. What initiated tonight's topic? I just happened to see it on Gab, right before we started. I didn't have anything in particular to talk about. I was busy. I was busy doing a long haul today, putting in some time transporting, and so had a good time actually. Listened to some Chuck Dixon, Ask Chuck Dixon's off of Unauthorized. Just downloaded a few MP3s and learned all about why John Carter was such a failure of a movie for Disney, despite the fact that the director was actually a big fan. So that was interesting. Um, Hawk says it could be code for no Jews. I don't think so. And frankly, the brown eyes and must be funny and a little weird. I was kind of thinking, maybe she's looking for somebody who works at Goldman Sachs. But the thing is, you have to value yourself. You have to have self-confidence. For me, it's often very frustrating to observe the lack of self-confidence that so many men have. Two of my best friends, the two guys that I spent most of my going out weekends with, were both tall, blonde, and good looking. And I can't remember either of them ever even approaching a woman. They just would sit back and, wait for the women to come to them, which they did. But the caliber of the woman that they would end up dating was usually, you know, much lower than the caliber of the women that those of us who would actually go and talk to women proactively were dating. Um, I mean, the single biggest problem that most guys have is they simply don't take a shot. The funny thing, in fact, I was thinking about the fact that she had 6 feet tall as the very first item on her list. But the ironic thing is that if you're a shorter guy like myself, I'm 5'9", the it was some of the easiest people to approach and ask out were girls that were like 5'11", 6 feet tall. And the reason is because nobody asked them out. Nobody at all. And I mean, it was a little bit startling sometimes because you'd meet these girls and they were tall and beautiful and all this sort of thing, and they would like almost be grateful. I have to admit, I did draw the line one time. There was a girl in college who was interested, and she was the center for the girls' basketball team. Really pretty, very attractive, but just people that size are slightly alarming. I mean, when they're that big, like just the size of their eyes alone is just so massive that at a certain point you have to say, okay, that's just ridiculous, you know, and forego. But the funny thing is, in retrospect, it probably would have been the decent thing to do because I cannot remember her ever having a single date throughout our 4 years of university. You know? But the point is that I'm telling Owen on you. He already knows. Plus, he likes lording it over on me. But the point is that for guys, and the most useful thing about that list that girl said is now you understand how wildly delusional even highly attractive women can be. Okay, if this girl who is very pretty, could pass for Margot Robbie's prettier, taller sister, if she is that delusional, imagine how delusional the nice, cute, 5'4", otherwise nondescript brunette is. I guarantee you, her list is probably a little bit more reasonable, especially when it comes to the 300,000, but not that much. Yeah, see, Hooten doesn't know what he's talking about. He says, I'd say in general, the more attractive they are, the more delusional they are too. No, you have it completely backwards. It would astonish you how arrogant and proud and delusional very unattractive women are. It's really astonishing. And it's, I mean, you have to really pay attention in order to be able to detect it. Cliff Cosmic says, is this the chick running HR requiring every job applicant to have a PhD and 8 years of experience? I mean, more or less. More or less. Sam points out, Sam agrees with me. He says, that's backwards. A six thinks she deserves a professional athlete. Yeah. Um, Cactus Eater Bear points out, unattractive women are delusional and mean. That's true. You know, you forget that our self-perception is actually based on what's inside. You know, my perception of myself does not really match what you see. My grandmother once said when she was in her early 70s, she said, I'm shocked when I look in the mirror because that's not me. I said, well, how old do you really feel like you are? She said, honestly, I've felt about like 15 years old my entire life. You know, I don't feel inside, I don't feel any older than that, even though there's a considerable body of evidence suggesting otherwise. And so, I mean, think about the, you know, the gammas who have never actually been on a date with a girl, and the way that they just talk about how they wouldn't go out with the cheerleader even if she asked them out, and how uh, you know, models all look like boys and that kind of stuff. You're just like, what planet are you living on? CCP said my maturity peaked around 20. Well, the thing is that we all tend to identify ourselves by our peaks, no matter what it is. You know, I still have the internal confidence from when I was like 20, 21 years old. You know, I think that I probably, uh, I, I probably peaked in terms of just sheer unwarranted, irrational confidence when I was 20, when I was living in Tokyo. Um, you know, we judge our intelligence by the IQ test that we took when we were 17, right? Or whatever. You know, we never identify ourselves by the lowest score we ever got on some sort of proxy test, only the highest. When we measure our height, we round up. You know, all this delusion is rounding up. It's just a question of how much are you rounding up? How irrationally and how exaggerated a manner are you rounding up? And so, and actually that's something I was talking about with someone today. You know, if you're a woman, you have no idea the superpower that you have. You have an absolute superpower because you can instill a sense of confidence in a young man in his formative years that will last for decades. You know. Now, women don't like to compliment men. Most women avoid complimenting men like the plague because too many men immediately take it as some sort of suggestion or invitation to ask them out. But if once a week you pick some man that you have some level of acquaintance with, I'm not just talking about like, yeah, I'm not talking about your kids if you're a mother. I'm talking about, if you're, I'm talking about, and I'm not talking about your husband or whatever, though that's also a good thing. I'm just saying that, like, men that with whom you're acquainted with, you know, and it doesn't have to be a big compliment, but just, some sort of uh, general compliment. They, there are some men who have never, ever been complimented by a woman who isn't their mother. You know, it's absolutely astonishing that what kind of difference that can make. And so, I'd encourage you to do that. Obviously, not in a way um, that will cause them to obsess on you, but it's real. Russ Barron says that's bleak, man. It's maybe it sounds bleak, but it's the way that it is. You know, I was thinking about you know why my level of confidence was so much higher than some of my friends and other people that I've known that I think well of. And this wasn't like any sort of posturing. This wasn't any sort of fake it till you make it stuff. I'm talking about guys that I knew well. I knew them. They knew me. We knew where our mutual levels of confidence were and how they compared to each other, right? And I was wondering about it, and I realized that it was probably the result. If you added the total number of words together, it came to about 10 words. Sam says, probably because of your speed and intelligence. No. I mean, part of that, yes. But but remember, intelligence doesn't make people self-confident. I mean, when when you think about all the intelligent people you know, how many of them are self-confident? Not very many. Most intelligent people are way too self-conscious to be self-confident. Um, it is true that the athleticism is definitely part of it. But, and so I was always confident because I was much faster than everybody else. That confidence is nothing more than a belief that things are going to work out well for you. And I did have that belief because whenever it came to a sporting thing, I could always outperform what everybody was expecting, right? Um, I think the reason intelligence doesn't make people self-confident is because I think that the more intelligent you are, the more scenarios you can see, the more pathways to things going wrong you can see, and also the more uh, analysis paralysis um, tends to affect you. Um, Cliff Cosmic says, intelligence allows you to doubt yourself in new and innovative ways. Exactly. Um, you know, Physical strength, lifting weights definitely helps. I mean, you can just see when you see guys suddenly start, like when they get to the point where you can start seeing the muscles on them, like the shoulders start coming out and the biceps start rippling. You start seeing the one vein on the biceps. You can literally see them walking taller, standing taller, you know, being less deferential. Um, Sam says the fast kids on the football team always knew they could juke you out of your cleats. Yeah, I mean, one thing that we see over here is that most of the best soccer players just, they just carry themselves with a level of confidence that you don't see in the lesser ones. You know, and so, but I do think that, but what takes you from, you know, the, a high level, even a high level of confidence in general, to a very specific one when it comes to intersexual relations for a guy. And I would submit that that comes from what women tell them. You know, it's just a theory, but I do think that it is a topic worth exploring. I think it's something that it's worth, for those of you who are women, I think it's worth experimenting with a bit. See what kind of difference it makes. Again, not your sons, and don't start with your spouse. If it works well, then you might want to consider using it positively with your husband. And so if you look at the positive effect that you can have on people, I mean, what a great thing. What a gift to give them. Because I think there's also the reverse. One thing that I notice a lot, I mean, I see it in other people's relationships. I see it in the way that certain types of women always react towards me. And, for me, it's just incredibly amusing. But there's also a natural tendency in women when they encounter men with self-confidence is not just to test them, but even to try to tear it down. I've even asked people, like, why do you not have anything good to say about this? Well, why do you not have anything good to say about your husband's accomplishments? He's a very accomplished man. How come you never say anything positive about that? Well, I don't want him to get a big ego. I find that both sad and mildly amusing. The reason I find it amusing is, the idea that anything any woman can say is going to scratch my ego in the slightest is kind of funny, because it's not based on what people say today. My self-vision is not my 54-year-old self. There's nothing to do with that. And by the way, not exactly hard to detect when someone is attempting to take you down for their own reasons. It was, I mean, for me, I find it very sad when you see, whether it's wives or family members or whatever, intentionally denigrating and attempting to minimize the accomplishments of the men in their lives. Personally, I suspect that it's a control mechanism. I need to keep them from thinking that they're out of my league, that they're out of my control. And one of my favorite things to do this is for the guys. Here's an experiment. We've got one experiment for the girls. Here's an experiment for the guys. Whenever you see a woman doing that, don't call her on it. Start praising the accomplishments of the guy she's attempting to tear down. You know, tell him how much you admire, you know, the way that they teach. Tell them how much you appreciate how accomplished they are at fixing things. And it is hilarious to see the expression on the woman's face who's been trying to tear him down. You know, what a great gift to give other people the gift of confidence. You know, Russ Barron says, I see that a lot in the car shop. Lots of cutting the husband down in front of the shop girls. Oh, absolutely. You know, because you know, it's they're trying to make the person look less attractive because they're insecure themselves. It's obvious. Exterminator Bear says, hey Vox, got my goat skin anti-fragile yesterday. It's beautiful. Excellent. I'm delighted that you're happy with it. But yeah, the production team did a great job in designing that whole set. It was a little more challenging than I thought, to be honest, coming up with the cover images and stuff, but they really did a fantastic job on that one. Defoe also got his anti-fragile today. It's Christmas in June. Anyhow, you know, don't be afraid to praise people. Don't be afraid to compliment them. And I'm not talking about generic, cheap compliments and that sort of stuff. Find something that's meaningful. Find something that's relevant. Yeah. But I think that in particular, for women who are dealing with younger men, you know, men in their formative 16 to 25 or so, I think that the ability that you have to bestow an unshakable confidence in young men is verging on a superpower. You know, so Jay Beela says it was a lot easier to compliment women's husbands before the COVID. So many husbands cucked. That's beside the point. They need it more. Maybe if they had been given compliments and if their confidence had been stronger, they might have been able to resist. You know, one of the things that I was very proud about my entire family was the way that none of them bought it for even a fraction of a second. You know, I had no fears whatsoever that any of them were going to give in to the pressure. You know, even though obviously it affected them a lot more than it affected me. They were, I think it may have been a little difficult for them at times to see how much I was enjoying it. Wait, we have an excuse to never go out? Yes. But anyhow, you know, instead of dreaming and getting caught up in their delusions, you know, it'd be good to see women attempt to build up men. And by the same token, for men, you can do the same thing, because the kind of women that, the quiet and shy type of women are kind of in a similar situation to most men. You know, they're not out there, you know, getting complimented and so forth. Hawk says, no subservient man had any chance in hell of resisting the COVID narrative. No, of course not, because, if they were involved with a fearful woman, then, it was do not pass go, do not collect $200, go directly and get your vaccination. Um, One finger wagged at them by boss lady, and it's 4 vaxes, no questions asked. Yeah. No, you know, I am much more likely to tell a woman who's um, a bit, shy and quiet. I'm much more likely to compliment a woman like that than, you know, a girl who is well aware of her own power over men on the basis of her attractiveness. Just because, it's fun to see people's eyes sparkle. It's nice to see, you know, people enjoy being appreciated. The Idaho Crow Crusader says, I struggle with despising weak men. Of course you do. You also are attracted to strong alpha males. That's normal. I'm not telling you, hey, just do what comes easy and automatically to you. I'm telling you the exact opposite. You know? Um, Exterminator Bear says, I was a BMW tech. It was known uh, have a young beautiful woman service writer. Men don't like telling a pretty girl they can't afford repairs. Okay, that's pretty funny. Um, I wonder how shapeable confidence is after your formative years. You spoke about how personality is shaped during that time. I don't think that I don't think that you can build that really strong level of confidence after your formative years, with the possible exception of, if you become like a successful CEO and you get accustomed to people bowing down to you all the time. But that's very different, and that's almost, that's a situational thing, and that's almost a form of delusion. It becomes a form of delusion in itself. Um, so uh, Russ Barron said, I really enjoyed mentoring shy or handicapped athletes. See, I took exactly the opposite thing. I I was like, we were at a trade show in the game industry, and uh, they this kid came up, and I mean, he's like the most badly handicapped person I've ever seen who was still fully functional mentally, and people are kind of like, didn't really know what to say to him. And he came up to look at our game, and I said, so I'm guessing you're really good at computer games. And he laughed and said, yeah, I can't really do much else. I was like, fair enough. You know, like everyone was so relieved, because when I had said that in a manner that indicated that I was, you know, aware and acknowledging the fact that he was very crippled, um, there was all that sort of thing. But, like I said later to a friend, Do you really think he doesn't know? You know, is he going, wait, I'm what? You know, of course he knows. Okay, it's fair enough. Didn't do Bezos or Gates much good. Yeah, but you know what? I bet that the reason that Lauren Sanchez, was able to win Bezos over is I bet that she was very, very good at building him up. You know, she got him on like human growth hormone, and he's lifting weights, and he's looking more confident, carrying himself, much more confidently. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are people who are so ingrained in their behavioral patterns that no situational scenario is going to significantly affect them. Um, it's just the way that it is. So, but um, don't be afraid to compliment others. Don't be afraid to build others up. Um, if they haven't done anything negative to you, don't tear them down. And I mean, even if they're ankle biters taking shots at you, the best thing you can do is just ignore them. There's no there's no point in getting into it. You're not going to fix them. You're not going to change their mind. There's no need whatsoever to answer people who are saying ridiculous things. Fuber says, if you are that rich, just giving a man the sense that you are not gold digging is a big attraction. Yeah, definitely. Although, there is something to be said for um, the people that can understand the transactional nature of human relationships. So, um, Dan Pena said, people with the most self-esteem are the most likely to give others credit. Well, I think that's probably true just because they don't fear, they don't they don't regard uh, credit as being a zero-sum game. I mean, I personally find it difficult to uh, praise people for work that is done just because my expectations are high. For me, the fact that I didn't have to say anything at all, I interpret that as praise. Because I fundamentally feel like I know what I'm doing. I want to be left alone to do it. I mean, I mean, this may sound a little arrogant, but in most circumstances, I do not feel that anybody else is in a position to judge what I'm doing. That's one of the places that the phrase, I don't expect you to agree, I don't expect you to even understand. I don't think that sounds very Delta, Fubert. um, but um, Hawk says there's a mark of how far I'd come when my friends started ribbing instead of encouraging. Exactly. I mean, the idea that it would have puzzled me greatly if my friends had, encouraged me. You know. Um, so, anyhow, uh, so don't give in to delusion. Work on building up the confidence of others, and I expect it'll have a positive effect on yourself. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.